This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
No, thank you. Thank you, Lil Jun. Lil Jun was like, turn on your recording. You're talking about good stuff.
How do you talk about that without recording on it? What were we talking
about? The fact that we have actually covered a big chunk of this chapter when they found their ter'angreal, right? So the exciting part about this chapter, right, is that Aviendha gets her ability, touches all the ter'angreal, and has her little epiphany and realizes that she has this talent of, I can tell you what ter'angreal are, and then disappears to never use it again. But like, it is an exciting chapter because we get to find out what a bunch of the ter'angreal were that the kin had in the store in Ebu Dar. And they got pulled out one by one, and we got their description. A lot of these were described in that chapter. And we should actually go back and reference and figure out which episode we talked about that on. Editing radio, maybe insert that here.
If it's easy, editing radio will enter here.
Editing Aradia here to say that yes, we did discuss all of this exhaustively in episode 393, Path of Daggers, chapters 4 and 5. Link will be in the description.
But yeah, so it was fun to sort of talk about those, but we definitely sort of referenced this chapter, and if you want to go back and reference that, we sort of figured out what a lot of them were. But still, it's fun. We get to see them again, and we get to see it in real time. And, Aviendha has a good time. Plus, there's more Aviendha-Elayne relationship stuff going on.
Yeah, which we're going to be unpacking that. So it's a good day to be doing only one chapter.
Given
our recent streak of doing double hitters to make episode 500 fit. And we'd be like, oh, this is great. Like, this is a chapter that I do think is going to take us a whole episode's worth of time because we have all the ter'angreal stuff, which is very fun and exciting. And then we have all the Elayne and Aviendha stuff, which is very sapphic. So, yeah. Shall we get into it?
They're just friends, okay?
He can put the word sister on the page all he wants. Doesn't change the facts.
Oh, yeah. There's a certain sister-wife kind of like to complete that sentence, right? Like, but not even that, right? Like, it's more... Anyway, we'll get to it.
But for now, I'm going to get to the read-in of Chapter 15, A Different Skill, with this symbol being the spears and bucklers for Aiel, because Aviendha is central to both the ter'angreal and the sapphicness.
And the skill.
She's pretty important for this chapter. This chapter has no real purpose without Aviendha. So, it's good to have the Aiel spears.
So is the different skill referring to her skill with reading ter'angreal or her skill with Elayne?
It's the skill with ter'angreal.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And it is explicitly on the page.
Okay.
It's in Elayne's thought, but to Elayne's fury, a quiet, simmering fury that clenched her jaw, she got lost on the way to her apartments. Those rooms had been hers since she left the nursery, yet twice she took a turn only to find that it did not lead where she expected, and a sweeping flight of marble-railed stairs took her in entirely the wrong direction. Burn her, now being with child, was fuzzing her wits completely. She could feel puzzlement and increasing concern through the bond as she retraced her way, climbed a different set of stairs. Some of the guardswomen murmured uneasily, not quite loudly enough for her to make out the words, until the bannerwoman in charge, a slim, cool-eyed Saldaean named Devor Zarbayan, silenced them with a sharp word. Even Aviendha began looking at her doubtfully. Well, she was not about to have getting lost in the palace flung in her face. I'm just going to stop there. That's way earlier than I thought, but that's fine, because that's the entirety of what's happening for the whole section that I could have read.
It does. It repeats a little bit. The only other thing is that Brigida says we need to talk of this later. I fear there's nothing to be done. But, right?
Yes. That's kind of the bookend to it.
Right. So there's this beginning of she lost her way to the apartment, and then Aviendha's like, we need to talk about this. Right?
Brigida says.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and Elayne's just like, nuh-uh. And that's basically that for the time being. We won't get resolution for another couple of chapters.
But what's going on is the apartment is moving, right?
Yes, this is the rearranging. This is the Dark One is having a rough day and starts doing interior redecorating for some reason.
He's done it. We've seen it in the White Tower, and now we're seeing it in the Camelin Palace.
Have we seen it in the White Tower yet?
Ooh, has the Brown and the Novice apartment switched?
I don't think that's happened yet. I don't know, though, because the Wheel of Time is a flat puddle.
I thought it had, because I thought it happened long before Egwene, because when she's kidnapped, she's like, what's going on? Why are the Browns...
No, Egwene's there for the day that it happens.
Oh, okay. Then then she just got kidnapped, so we haven't really seen her in the...
Yeah, so it hasn't happened yet. Timeline's getting real fuzzy for us. this fourth to last book. But yeah, it's at this point we haven't established that that's a mechanic yet. That's going to happen in like 2 chapters. So that way, by the time it does happen in the White Tower, it's not as surprising to us as readers, even though the White Tower will be experiencing it for the first time.
Are they happening at the same time? Do we have an owl hoot or something like that to synchronize?
I mean, I'm sure we have a nerd's graph on the internet somewhere, but I don't think there's anything in the text that would give us that.
Well, I can research that later. I don't think that's super important right now to figure out, because I doubt they're synced up at all.
But we should find that out at some point on one of these chapters when it happens.
Right.
It will come up again.
Right.
So we should find the answer between now and then.
But yeah, this weird thing where Elayne doesn't realize the rooms have moved. She thinks her own memory is being inconsistent and that the pregnancy is making her forget the house she grew up in. And so she is this unreliable narrator, right? She's saying, oh God, I just keep getting lost. This is crazy. My mind is just all fuzzy from this pregnancy. Meanwhile, everyone else is like, okay, we need to talk about the fact that like the rooms are being moved and they're not where they should be. And you're getting lost because these rooms don't exist. And Elaine's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. And everyone's like, why not? Like, what's the big deal? Like, I know there's nothing we can do about it, but like, and Elaine's being like, I don't want to talk about the fact that my pregnancy is affecting my brain. And like, we're not, yeah, I can just see Brigida just like open mouth, like, that's not what I'm trying to talk to you about. Stop shutting me down.
And it also makes it a lot harder for Elayne to regulate her emotions if she thinks that she's like actually kind of losing her mind in her own house. Like, and then she blames all of her mood swings on the pregnancy. And it's like, girl, you think you're losing your mind. You're a little bit stressed, like legitimately upset because you think you're going slightly crazy. Like, give yourself a bit of a break. Like, no wonder she feels miserable and sullen and awful. Like, she can't trust her own mind.
But at least her job is low stress. It's not like she's trying to take over a country or anything.
Yeah, it's a good thing her job is low stress. Yeah. Totes. Well, and can we talk about the food that they're giving her, right? Like, who is feeding a pregnant woman prison food? I'm so angry.
It's stale bread and water. It's stale bread and like watery tea.
It's the worst. She's being literally deprived of the most critical nutrients during the most important part of her pregnancy, and the only reason that she gets any kind of intervention is for a series of very fortunate events that will happen in this chapter. But like, it's ridiculous that she's being put on like a weight loss campaign while she's in her first trimester. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
By a bunch of women. Like, I guess can you explain this to me? What is Jordan thinking? Like, why is he writing this chapter? Why is he writing these women to be just completely clueless when it comes to pregnancy? A lot of them are mothers themselves who have gone through pregnancy in this canon of the story.
It's also in this line, she'd overheard some people, including women, disparaging her own guardswomen's ability to fight. It's the same fucking reason. We just absorb the patriarchy too fucking hard. We're not acting in our own self-interest a lot of the time, and that means refusing to question bad things that happened to us and passing them on to the next generation. Like, well, I survived, right? I think it's a little ridiculous that an entire palace full of ostensibly the best, most educated people would also be like that. Like, it's normally you have this kind of ignorance reserved for the common people. But also, I mean, like, Victorian everything. The Victorian era in general. Like, I mean, women are telling each other, like, don't breastfeed. You know? Like, I mean, we're great at tearing each other down and body policing ourselves, and like we're agents of patriarchy, just like you men. That's best I got.
Okay.
It's unfortunate and very simple on Jordan's part, because it's not like all women are like that in all times, and it could have been cool for him to have one of the nations who was only ever literally a queendom to like have a more enlightened approach to how women's health should work, especially since just some random midwife in the city apparently knows what's what. Common people know what's what. I think maybe it also might be just specifically Robert Jordan's disdain for nobility in some respects. Like, they just have dumb medicine and you need a common person to come in with the real world to like tell them how it works.
I also think Camelin is trying to ride two horses here. You've got the Camelin that is, you know, sort of basically a representation of Arthurian legend England, right? And so in that era, people behave a certain way. But then you also have Camelin that's been ruled by women in this magic world, where they would have solved some of these problems because they have the power and the ability to do so. And so, you know, how do you justify essentially having this medieval approach to women's health in a place that would never, ever tolerate that?
Especially a kingdom that has, or queendom, that has a very specific relationship with the White Tower.
Right.
Like, that is many, many centuries old. You'd think that a little bit of yellow wisdom would have trickled over occasionally to the fucking ruling class. You would think. So.
Black Oddjaw? Is that how we're going to blame it on the Black Oddjaw? That's what we always do.
I'm going to blame it on Robert Jordan. I'm just going to say RJ fumbled the ball on that one. He thought he had a point, but...
Oh, here, take a look.
Oh, Timber Cam. We've got a Timber Cam. Timber in the Sunshine Cam.
He's on the couch. Are you taking him to work, honey?
Work.
Oh, and there he goes. That was very brief. He loves going to work. He gets pets from many, many people.
Well, I mean, he is the best boy.
He is, and he's an office dog. So.
I mean, undoubtedly, he is lowering the average blood pressure by quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, totally. No, people definitely use him for therapy. She takes him because she tours different apartments, right? So they're like, so he gets to go into like empty apartments, and depending on, she always asks the people if they care if he comes along. But he sells apartments all the time because they see a dog running around the apartment, right? And that makes it home. And all of a sudden, like, there's a dog in this home. It's our home, right? Isn't that adorable, right? She sells the apartments with that dog. Plus, he's cute, and so they're always in a good mood. Like, he is the best. Like, that he pays our rent, man. That boy.
He more
He's a
than
good
pulls
dog.
his weight. He literally goes to work and sells houses, sells apartments.
Yep, he sure does. Yeah, he's a working dog. Yeah.
What a good working dog.
I mean, have I told you about the story about how he bought me a washer and dryer?
No.
No. So I used to take him to a park around the corner, which was just sort of a school's soccer yard, which is really common here in Portland. A lot of parks are just school soccer yards during the off season. And you make friends with the people among there. And I was moving to an apartment, and I was sort of talking to some people I see on a regular basis, and I was like, oh yeah, I need a washer and dryer. This new place, they've got hookups. And one of the ladies goes, oh, I've got a washer and dryer that are in storage that I'm just paying every month to store. Do you want them for free? Because I moved in, and she's like, and I was like, well, why would you give those to me? And she's like, well, Timber's just so cute, and she liked the way I treated him and all that kind of stuff. So, she gave me those, and I took them home, and I was expecting old beat up washers and dryers, but no, they were brand new, $500 each, like never been used. Took the plastic off of them, like, yep.
Wow.
And then I used them for a couple of years, and then I sold them to Travis.
Wow.
So Travis is currently, basically he moved into a sort of I don't know, some sort of condo group living apartment share. Well, they all share one washer and dryer, and they needed one for that group living situation. So they bought those off of me, and now they're being used for that. So they were super nice. I miss them all the time. I wish I still had them.
Well, just go to the dog park, apparently.
Yeah, no, seriously. So
Find some more.
yeah, and the way Timber, like, I mean, Honestly, I would never have to feed that dog. All I have to do is take him as for a walk, and like people just give him treats. Like he begs so well. He could feed himself. Anyway, I love that dog. I can go about him on for hours. You clearly can. Yeah, I love Timur. He's a good boy.
Unlike this chapter.
We're having a little trouble getting through this one, aren't we?
Okay, so let's talk about the guardswomen. So they're excited to get pretty lacquered breastplates to make them look even more like decoys. They're excited to have their fancy rooster feathers to preen with. But also there's this really interesting line about how they're really fast students at the sword because they did not already think that they knew something of how to use a blade. And Elayne's like, yeah, duh. How could you believe you already knew something if you needed lessons in it?
Mm-hmm.
Which is RJ, I think, actually nailing the difference between the average man and the average woman in American socialization when it comes to gender roles and like toxic expressions of masculinity or femininity. Like, there is a extremely common prevalence of people who are socialized as male to be like, I know everything, like, and be really arrogant and completely incapable of learning things because they're too busy proving that they're not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people who are socialized as women are way more likely to be super humble and apologetic and actually pay attention and study the manual and be very concerned about getting it wrong and actually want to do it right the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And beat themselves up excessively when they don't. Like, these are real common trends that we are still dealing with in 2024 to a super heavy degree. And I feel like RJ actually captured a really good way of expressing, just with Elayne's disbelief at like why that would be a commendable attribute. But these men are like, we've trained a lot of men. Like, trust us. This is unusual.
I had a friend in Virginia who I used to basically sort of, no, we used to joke around, but I used to be like, yeah, I'm always right. Like, no matter what, like, you'll never catch me being wrong. You know, I remember that, like, getting into that persona. And it's really easy to, when you are a little wrong, to sort of dismiss that and, like, sort of sideline it. And when you're right, really point it out and amplify it and repeat it over and over and over again. It's not that hard to really make someone feel like you're always right. And then if you're wrong, that's when you start being able to gaslight somebody, right? Is when you're like, no, I'm always right. And if I said this thing, I must have been right and you must have been wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember, I never got to that point, but I remember like how easy it was with this joke to like carry it to the point where like, yeah, I can fix anything and I'm always right about things. And if I'm wrong, and I did things like look them up when her back was turned and then be like, oh yeah, I know that the whole time. Right. You know, stuff like that. Like it wasn't that hard.
Yeah, I know so many people like that, and it's not always malicious. It's
Mm-hmm,
just a way that people are. It's a joke. It's a personality trait. It's covering for some insecurity. Like, it's not always, like, intentionally malicious, but the number of people that weaponize it has caused us some pretty global problems, shall we say.
Totally. Yeah, no, and it was, at first it was just a couple of coincidences, right? So a couple of things where I said one thing and she said the other thing, and like, it just turned out like maybe 2 or 3 times in a row, I happened to be right. And then once you get that, it's easy to run with it.
Confirmation bias.
Yep.
Easy.
Very easy. Yeah.
we are simple little logic loops at our core.
Yeah, it really, like 3 things really is all you need to create a trend in your brain. And from then on out, that's just all you need is 3 things in a row.
Yeah. And like, when you know that about yourself, it is possible to build like many mental blocks to like get around that, but it's so hard. It's pushing water uphill levels of hard. Like, you can do it, but it's so hard.
So they finally get out of their wet clothes, right? Like,
yes, they find the rooms, they get to cozy towels and bathrobes and like all that good stuff. That's good.
She and Elayne frequently brushed each other's hair at night, yet accepting the simple service from a lady's maid put spots of color in Aviendha's sun-darked cheeks. Why would she find that so embarrassing to receive from a servant when she has no problem receiving it from Elayne?
Do I have to explain? Robert!
What else do we know about Aiel and brushing hair? And yeah, there's just a lot that go. Yeah,
it's an incredibly intimate act between lovers, and you just do it with a servant.
Yep.
Just.
Yep. The side eye, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, should I just like fondle her breasts back? Like, I mean, how far is this going? Like, like that's where Avienda's at. It's like, what the fuck am I? This is not how I was raised.
Wait, what parts of my body are you washing? I don't know. I don't find that acceptable. That's okay. Like, I know we do it, but yeah. No.
Yeah.
I just pay her to clean up. I don't think that's.
Yeah. But, again, this is Robert Jordan being like, la, 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 I can't hear the completely sapphic romance that I wrote. La, 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 la.
And I often wonder how much of that is just to get, honestly, past the publishers.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've definitely received a bit of pushback about my firmly established more than headcanon.
Sure.
But, I just... Yeah, the idea that RJ just decided to like slap on some censor-proof buffer words real thick just to make sure just feels more accurate. On the other hand, I have heard other people say that the fact that this is a well-written romance means that Robert Jordan can't have done it intentionally. Which I do find holds a lot of water, unfortunately.
He's like, I'll just write these really good friends, like I've read in all of these other books that I've, because he's read so many books, right? Like where these romances and good friends exist between women. They're actually just these, thinly veiled, lesbian romances, right? Like those exist. And he didn't realize. And so he copied one of those relationships.
I mean, that holds as much water as the censorship theory. It allows for me to be right and for RJ to be clueless.
Exactly, all at the same time. Yeah, no, that's how I'm headcanoning it. Is that he just because all this is all legends fade to myth, right? All that kind of stuff. All these characters have a background in other stories. That's where he took them from. He took Elayne from stories. He took Aviendha from stories, right? And I'm sure in one of those stories you have two very close women where the author fully intended them to be gay. And just it wasn't out there in the public, and Jordan misinterpreted it, used that story, created these two characters, and bam!
Everyone's happy.
Everybody's happy.
Headcanon.
Yep.
It's a headcanon for our headcanon. I like it.
Okay. We see Aviendha giving into the silks, right? She's really into the Drabudar dresses, right? Tylan gave them rest in peace, gave them a bunch of, beautiful dresses. Yeah, well, at least two.
That's enough.
Yeah. She's headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, we see how Aviendha is getting yoinked from the lap of luxury in the nick of time because of how quickly and easily she leaps up and happily paws through her dresses looking for the one that she's going to wear. And she's like into it. Like she's been reluctant every single scene up until now. This is the first time on page that she's been genuinely enthusiastic and only making a vague gesture towards reluctance. And that's the chapter she gets yoinked back to her people. Like, that was in the nick of time, according to her teachers.
And right now, what's going on with Aviendha is basically all they need from her is her to stand up and say, like, no, I am a wise one. I am as smart as you. Like, she's more powerful. She knows more about, ruling. She's been ruling with Elayne. She knows as much about the one power. She's just an incredibly competent, talented person who is absolutely ready to be a wise one. And so what the wise ones are doing is basically saying, we're going to make you as uncomfortable as possible until you stand up to us.
Do you think that they would have let her become a wise one if she stood up to them here and now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this is test one. They are waiting for her to be like, no, I am here with Elayne. This is what I need to be doing. I have learned all I need to know. You need to acknowledge me as a wise one because I am there and I am ready and I need to be part of this. If she had stood up in this moment, she could have been a wise one in this moment. And I think that, they let what's-her-ass Savannah do it and she didn't have any of the training. At any time in the last 6 months, I bet Aviendha could have stood up and said, I am a wise one, and they would have let her do it. Right?
Yeah, the part where they let her go her own way for so long and now suddenly that's a problem. That doesn't track at all. So yeah, I'd never read this scene in that light before, but doing my notes today, I was just like, The entire separation with Elayne was avoidable. All the Aviendha had to do was stand up for herself in this moment, and they wouldn't have been separated. Elayne probably wouldn't have made that disastrous mistake with the Black
Right.
Raja and gotten so many people killed. Like, so much would have gone different for Elayne if Aviendha had grown a pair in this moment.
And because what does she do? She goes back to the waste. She does a bunch of useless tasks
Yeah, she does nothing.
until she finally gets fed up, and declares herself a wise one and comes back as part of the last battle.
Yeah, like the only difference is that they would have said, okay, now you're ready to go to Roydeon for your passage through the columns.
Right,
Take a
right.
short trip away from Elayne for a few days, but like nothing like the separation that they actually endure. Elayne would have responded very differently to, I need to take a long weekend to go have like an intense psychedelic experience.
And can you imagine Elayne being there for Aviendha when she comes out of Ruidian?
Oh, that would have been amazing. And then Elayne would have gone barreling headfirst into there to try to engineer what the fuck was going on. It would have been a disaster. But like, it would have been so emotionally satisfying before it was an engineering disaster.
And I feel like this is also a good chapter to talk about what happens at the columns of Ruidian a little bit, because we get into Aviendha's talent. And I feel like what happens in those columns is integral to what's happening in this chapter.
The reason that she has the confidence to go mess with them is because of this chapter where Elayne was like, oh my God, you have this amazing talent. It's a different skill. This is so cool. You have this amazing ability. And she's like, all right, so I have this amazing ability. Like, let me see what that ability gets me. And then we get the whole flash forward sequence, which is a choice, but like it's only possible because of this.
Yeah, and how much of it's the same talent, right? This talent to read, or aka communicate with ter'angreal, right? Is this, most ter'angreal aren't receptive, but the columns are, right? So she can read the intent of the columns, and the columns, because they are, intelligent in, a lot of ways, right? There's something going on with those columns, right? But anyway, they read her, and they decide, hey, there's a communication there that results in a change in what the columns are showing.
Right. It's like she's able to bring up the user interface
Exactly.
of all of them
Right.
in her head.
Right.
And just look at it and not even interact with it, except the columns have like an extra like AI or something behind them, and it actually does reach out and interact with her in a way that none of the others have. Yeah.
All the other ones are very passive menus. This is like, totally an
by
active
looking
AI.
at it, you've
Yeah.
collapsed its quantum state and
Right.
something's happening.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's something with her reading the ter'angreal that totally allows that ter'angreal to be changed, altered, because we see that we see that when that ter'angreal is created, the Aes Sedai there tie it to the history of the Aiel people in order to show them. They're like, what are we going to show them? They make that decision, I believe, in those flashbacks, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
and so like there is that certain like, it's a programmable computer of some sort.
And it just she switches it from tell me the part of my past that matters to tell me the potential futures that my choices might play out in a very me-centric kind of way. And it's just a setting.
Yeah.
It's just a setting.
So here's my question. Do you think that now you have a third time going through the columns, right? That like they're a third passage to Ruidian, because you have the first one, which will be the rings, showing you potential paths your life is going to take. They're still going to keep that for the apprentices. You got the second one, which is going to show you the history, and then the third pass, which shows you the future. Or do you think you just get the future on your second pass through the columns? Or second pass to Ruidian, first pass through the columns?
I feel like losing their history in that kind of a way would be unnecessary. Even if it loses some of the like eat your own eyeballs kind of nonsense. That like if it loses like that impact, like I still think that losing it entirely would be shitty. So I'd hate to think that like the Aiel history is just gone and that setting just has been erased forever. Like that would kind of blow.
But it's not the test that it used to be, because everybody knows the history.
Yeah, it's only valuable for research purposes and like general interest in like how your family passed through those historical events. It's not the same kind of import. So like the future vision makes sense for putting you through an intense mental trial, but also not every person is going to have world altering choices to make. And you already get a taste of looking forward when you go through the rings. So, like, I don't know. It just seems complicated to get to pass through twice and get two different experiences.
And then what's even going to happen with the Aiel wise ones, right? What's the future of the Aiel? If the Aiel are going to be the police of the world, like, what happens to the wise ones, who kind of seem to be the ruling class of the Aiel, right? They're the ones who get all together and make the decisions that sort of exist to force the clan chiefs to do things.
Yeah, but it's like knowing the future is messy.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if you know that it's not the real future, having any kind of clear idea of what your life path might look like and the implications for your descendants and your culture, like that's not gonna. I mean, maybe that would be good for the leaders, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it would be good for the leaders, like to have some idea of like what their decisions are and like, oh, you need to not have blood feud with this person. You need to absolutely like refuse this marriage offer. Like what, like that kind of thing. Like maybe that could be helpful, but we get an Aiel quote that a woman who knew her own future perfectly would be like an animal or go insane.
Which is the whole point of Dune, by the way. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, is the Paul Atreides knows his own future. Every moment, every second, he can't avoid it. He can't. That's why he can see even when he's been blinded, because he sees the future happening as it's happening. Right? Like it's a weird concept, but yeah, but he's trapped. He's trapped on that rail, and he knows perfectly every moment that's going to happen until his death.
And he goes insane as a result.
Right.
He is not a happy camper. I mean, he has a rough life also, but like his mental state is not great.
Not great.
He does not like knowing everything that's going to happen.
And Wheel of Time, the future, for the most part, I know Min's visions are like pretty locked in, but they're also pretty fucking vague, right? Like there does seem to be the ability to create choices, right? Even Min's visions have some either or choices built into them, right? Like choices are important.
Yeah, and you don't know how you're going to get there.
No.
And like the journey before destination mentality is very strong with Min's visions. Yeah, so yeah, maybe Avi will just like set it back to the past. Maybe she'll go fuck with it again and like reset it, because we never get an answer to what happens when another wise one goes through it. A wise one goes off to find out, and then we don't get that resolved before the books end. So like, I just I think that the Aiel will have to figure out new routines. They're gonna have to figure out how this thing works and what they're gonna use it for, and like their traditions will just have to change, and how they remember their history will have to change, because I think she changed it permanently, but I don't know if you want to keep sending people through it if all it's going to do is like break your brain and show you history that you already know. But also, I would love to get to walk through like the history of my ancestors vividly. Like,
right? Wouldn't that be really cool? Yeah, really like
immersive experience in like people that I'm genetically connected to in the past. Like, yeah, I want that. That would be super neat.
Because I have no genetic history whatsoever. Mine barely goes back to my grandparents. I don't not even that. Like I don't know my father's parents at all. Never met them. Know nothing about them.
That's so wild to me.
Met my mother's parents a handful of times before they died, and neither of my parents have really carried forward any traditions from their families, right? Like I really have very little family history, and the idea of going back and like seeing like where my family came from and who I'm related to will be pretty cool, because I don't even know none of my great grandparents' names.
That's a lot. That's wild. Having so little family. I mean, I don't have a lot of family that like lives and stuff, but like it's been very easy for me to fill out the family tree going back to an obscene number of people pretty easily, and it's been fun.
And maybe if I had the tools, I could do that, right? It's not like I know my parents' names, I know my mother's grandparents' names. I could probably figure it all out, right? But like, I haven't done that research.
Yeah, but I didn't have to do most of the research to get back to my great grandparents. Like it was only after them, but like I've been able to keep filling it out And and it's been really fun too, doing the genetic tests and then finding the genealogical evidence to back up what the genetic test says, because the genetic test is like a fucking numbers game, right? But when you're just doing the genealogy and you're like, wait, here's a document that actually supports that, it's pretty neat. It's a fun feeling. It's a good dopamine hit. It's not cheap dopamine.
Yeah, no, I haven't gotten into that, but I know people who are really excited to sort of it does feel like they're filling out a puzzle.
Ancestry is very well gamified. The user interface is pretty click heavy, but I can't really blame them. But like, it's a very gamified experience, so it's a very fun hobby. Very fun puzzle. I
feel like I can't understand why there's so much to it. It feels like you would find your family tree up to a certain point and then you'd stop and there wouldn't be much more to do at that point. that laugh, oh my god, that laugh just said, you know nothing. You are in the shallow end of a very, very deep pool of which you have not even glimpsed a tiny bit. That's what that laugh said.
Yeah. Precisely. Precisely. It's I mean, did you know, for example, that the census of 1890 doesn't exist because it burned down?
No.
All the data was collected and then it went up in flames. There were approximately 6,000 records left from the entire census of 1890. So you just go from 1880 to 1900. It's great. Yeah, I've only really scratched the surface in a lot of ways. My mom's gotten way more into it, but I've gotten enough into it to... Yeah, it's... Because it just keeps going and going. Because other people have done so much work, and so then all your job is to find documentation that backs it up. And that's the grind, is actually finding real primary documents that back up that people exist and not just self-referencing ancestry trees. Because that shit will go back to fucking Charlemagne. No problem. The trick is figuring out where it just feathers out into just essentially computer hallucinations and circle jerking, as opposed to something that actually has documentation. But you can get a sketch idea of what could be the truth very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. Tons of dopamine just playing this little puzzle game and be like, oh, so that's fun. I talk about this on way too many podcasts, and I edit out most of it because I'm like, no one needs that.
Well, you know what I need to protect me from it? A small dagger with a rough hilt of deer horn wrapped in gold wire that's blunt and never been sharpened. I think that would be just the perfect thing to protect me from this talk of ancestry.
Yeah, it's like incognito mode.
Yeah.
On your browser.
The Dark One won't know what you're doing.
But your internet provider will.
Yeah. So... I think Celine would have loved this dagger, right? Her little, I don't want to be really on the dark side of the light side. If the Dark One couldn't find her, I think if she got a hold of this, we wouldn't have an evil Celine.
She would actually be able to play Team Celine.
As opposed to, right now she's kind of trapped by the Dark One, right? Like he was resurrecting her as Zindane, last chance, right? Like this, really, she is caught by her oaths to the Dark One. But if she could escape his sight... I can only imagine the evil, or I don't know, the chaos she would be, right? The chaos, yeah.
Chaos.
In a lot of ways, I think like Lanfear and Moradin are kind of on the same wavelength of like, they're not really good, they're not really bad, but they're looking out for themselves, but they're also this element of chaos introduced into whatever anybody else's plans are. It's one of the reasons I love Great Hunt so much, because it's fucking Lanfear and Moradin just being chaotic. Like,
so chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, we literally don't care whose plans we fuck up as long as plans are getting fucked up. It's a great way for a villain to be.
Going back and realizing just how much fucking Lanfear was doing in those books really blows me away.
Yeah, so imagine the chaos she'd get up to if she had this thing with her. That would be a lot.
And so basically, Aviendha picks this thing up and is like, I've been carrying this around. Like, I have this. I think I'm delusional, but like, it makes me feel safe, right? It's almost a security blanket for her.
Yeah, she's been puzzling over it more than any other ter'angreal. It's the one that like fascinates her most, and she's kind of like caught up in its spell. I mean, she's deep down in the user manual. She's reading the appendices of this manual, you know? Like, she is back there in, like, the third appendix. It's just, like, Finally, she's ready to give it to Elayne. It doesn't take her nearly as long with the rest, but this one she really needed to ponder for a while before being sure what it did, which makes sense because that's a pretty esoteric thing to do, to hide you from the Dark One. That's not like speaking over distance or something straightforward.
And this self-confidence that's just like, but if you didn't see it, then I must not have. And Elayne being like, hey, listen, I copied and pasted some code and it ran. That doesn't mean I understand how to program, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like,
you intuitively coded just based on me rambling about syntax. There's a very different skill.
Right. Very different skill. Yep.
To quote the chapter title, that's why Elayne thinks, this is different, because like she tried to teach Aviendha how to make ter'angreal, but like this is
not making
ter'angreal.
No.
This is reading ter'angreal. Like, I don't know how to print a book. Actually, I kind of do. But I don't really know how to make a book. But I very much know how to open it up and read it. Right? Like...
As I've discovered intimately, there's a big difference between the engineer who designed the tool and the technician who has to make it run to spec. And that there is a certain ideal that the engineers want often. And... sometimes you have to make some changes to get there, right? And like there is a certain amount of like practicality that comes with any sort of complex design machine, right? Like, and I kind of see Aviendha as being the one who like understands how it actually works and what it's supposed to do, but she couldn't like make it.
Yeah, kind of. It's like the difference between Matt and Perrin. Right? Like, Perrin likes making things. Matt likes solving things. Very, very different. Matt likes making problems and then fixing them. Perrin likes just making things that work in the first place.
Well, let me put it this way. I think Elayne would put make it very hard to change oil in a car as long as it made the car go fast. She wouldn't care that it made it hard to change the oil.
Yeah.
Whereas Aviendha would be very upset that the oil pan was hard to change. She'd be like, why even make a car if you can't change the oil easily?
Oh my God. Yes. Yes, that is a perfect analogy. Absolutely. Someone make that fan art. Elayne and Aviendha as like grease monkeys, just like totally in their like girl garage like vibe, but like arguing about engine design.
I see Elayne in front of a drafting table and Aviendha like in overalls covered in grease with like
actively under the car
with like wrenches that kind of look like spears, right?
Yeah, whereas Elayne is still working on her design at a drafting table. Oh my God, yes, totally. So yeah, Elayne is like, well, if you can do that with one thing, let's go look at all the other ones.
Right. So we go to the store of ter'angreal from Ebu Dar, stored by the kin that have been transported through. These are the ones that have come with the kin through the fleeing of the using of the Bowl of the Winds, and basically came all the way back with Elayne.
Yeah, and she puts out a sub-selection of this massive amount on her little like sideboard every day. Like she has, I mean, I'm thinking of it as kind of like a rock collection. If you only have like one place to display them, like maybe you rotate them every now and then, but in this case, it's like magic objects. So she just has whatever on the table any given day and just looks at it and thinks about it. And so we get to look at this smattering of them, which you'll all recognize from when we did this before, because these are the only ones we get described, right? Like there's a lot that never get described. We only ever get to see a bit.
There's a couple that get described in Ebu Dar that we never get to find out what they do. There was one or two like that, but for the most part, the ones that they described in Ebu Dar are the ones we find out about what they do here. There's like a pretty close correlation between the two.
Yeah, RJ's like, I can make however many characters, but that many ter'angreal? No.
No.
I need to have a limited number of ter'angreal to keep track of.
And I love in this first one where like she picks something up and this flexible rod, and she's like, oh, this causes pain. And Elayne goes, oh, Nynaeve already told us that. And Aviendha goes, yeah, well, and then like spews off this whole list of facts about what it actually does. And she's so not confident in herself until like, and then she brings up Nynaeve. And that immediately sends Aviendha into like, oh, you want to bring up Nynaeve? I'll tell you. I will tell you what it does. Yeah. and I'll be right.
Yeah, which is what she needs to be a wise one, right? Like Aviendha in like self-deprecating humble mode is just so unnatural. Like, no, you're a confident, intelligent woman. Act like it. And yeah, it just takes a little bit of ego poking.
It's only what I think. I don't know for sure. And like, yeah, and this whole over and over and over again, this point where like they find 5 plus 6 plus 3 plus 2 ter'angreal that all are for talking at people at a distance. Their cell phones. They find everybody's cell phone in a big
Yeah, they find a bunch of Bluetooths. Bluetooth earpieces and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just little attachments for your Google Glass.
Once again, how disappointed I am that none of these, now that we know what they are, got involved in the last battle. That you didn't have a bunch of fucking, like, Elayne with her earpiece in, giving it to all of her generals.
We could have had radios in the last battle.
Yeah. Think 5, like, this is basically like, 5 earrings for the men of the Borderlanders, 6 fingers for the, Perrin's army, and 3 bracelets for, who knows, like the Aiel, right? Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, give me, like, we have more than enough communication devices to hand out to, at least all the armies. And she was supposed to be the one who coordinates this, right? Like,
And what did she do? She set them in a box and was like, my sister's not here. I am sad, but not in a romantic way. They should just gather dust. Get vaporized when my fucking palace goes up in flames because the Trollocs attacked because Vera gave a stupid letter to stupid Matt for stupid reasons.
But again, seriously, where did all the ter'angreal all go in the last battle? Like, we didn't see very many of them used at all.
Yeah, Brandon Sanderson had all that energy for figuring out how to weaponize gateways and couldn't once bring up the ter'angreal that we had identified for fucking communication.
And had a whole big, like, that's the thing, like, there's multiple plot lines in multiple books about gathering ter'angreal for me, what feels like for the last battle, right? Like, that's why they come across these stores. And yeah, they get a couple of angreal, right? Like, XP. But it feels like the video game where you got the bag full of goodies that are no good to you, that like you went on all these quests for, and you fight against the bad guy and you just use flame arrows until he's dead or whatever. You're just like, okay, well, fine. I guess I have all these exotic goods that I got for no fucking reason.
I love being a completionist.
Do you also save all the unique items?
Obviously. Do you know me at all? I don't play very many video games, but yeah, inventory management is a problem.
So yeah, other ter'angreal.
Right, so
let's go through them.
What else should we talk
let's
about?
Go.
So we've got the cap that allows you to direct a device of some sort. I always imagine like the impulse machine from His Dark Materials. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of always what I imagine is like a wireless version of that. It's just a cap that lets you control the helicopter that you're sitting in or whatever. Like, sure. That I feel like we got a glimpse of one of those in Rand's visions.
I thought it controlled the Joe wing, the show wing.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we saw that in one of Rand's visions of the Age of Legends.
Right. I was like, why do I know what that is? It's a control helmet for one of the things, and I think it's from the vision. Although I have been watching X-Men, so I immediately thought of Cerebro, Patrick Stewart's like helmet that he puts on that lets him like see all the mutants.
Sure.
Yeah. So maybe a device lets you see all the channelers out there in the world.
That would be handy in an in a war of power context, being able to pick out channelers at a distance. We've got a iPod.
Yeah, small hinge box, covered with rippling red and green stripes, which makes me think of like just start and stop buttons for the music and like.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, red and green lights, or just like, and then because they're wiggly, I was thinking like maybe the data's encoded in those stripes, that maybe they're really thin and he's trying to like basically recreate records on the ter'angreal.
Sure. Yeah, we have no idea what he meant by that. I'm imagining like a Zippo lighter with just like decorative barber stripes on it, basically, like, which seems silly, but
right. Yeah, that was my first thought. Is like, if this is just a barber pole, like that's kind of what it looks like. Like,
right? Yeah. But it's an iPod. It's a music player.
Stripes could be a lot of things. Yeah, it's a music player. A flat bowl, almost a pace across, was looking at things that were far away. I mean, that's just a scrying bowl.
Yeah, it's a round TV screen, like whatever. Okay, it's a mirror that you'd use to talk to people, and then we've got a air humidif or a dehumidifier.
Dehumidifier, yep. Which Aviendha is like, oh my god, because it pulls water out of the air and puts it in a little bowl, right?
Right, but I'm imagining it was intended as a dehumidifier, not a water collector. You know?
Right. But
Aviendha's looking at it like,
doesn't-
ooh, this is a water collector. And it's like, I mean, water's a waste product from the purpose of having the thing. Like, sure.
That also reminds me, so this is another Stormlight Archive thing, but when they're in the mind world, and which doesn't really support people, they get themselves a magic dehumidifier, and that's how they survive, because they get water that way.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it could totally be a survival tool, but I would love to think of Aviendha being excited for not the right reason with this tool, you know?
Right. yeah. Ooh, the waste product. Yum.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
And then we get the cache of cell phones. Mm-hmm. Right. So
Yeah.
you got the figurine of the bird and a blue figure of a woman in an oddly cut skirt and coat. I couldn't figure out, was that just the Age of Legends fashion?
Yeah, it's just different fashion. Yeah.
5 earrings, 6 finger rings, and 3 bracelets. So those are all just cell phones.
Yeah. Cell phones, Bluetooth things, Secret Service headsets, whatever you want to imagine. And then an interesting saw thing that only works on metal or stone, not organic material.
It's a
apparently.
laser.
Okay. I was wondering if there was a material, a laser. Gotcha.
Well, because a laser will cut through metal and like that. But if you do it on things that burn, they'll just burst into flames. You're not going to cut through them. You're just going to burn
Gotcha.
them, right? So it wouldn't work on those. So yeah, it's essentially a ter'angreal powered laser.
Nice. And then there's a little rat preventer, like figure of a man, which I imagine like those little butler things that like hold papers at like certain bed and breakfasts, like, or whatever. It's just this little figurine.
I think he's doing this. Like his hand is up in a stop sign. Yeah, so he's saying.
Yeah, but he's little. He's like a garden gnome. It's a garden gnome that's like, no, you shall not pass.
So kind of like the spike that happens with the Dream ter'angreal, right? I imagine it creates a ward. It's just an anti-vermin ward. It's an anti-rat ward.
I'm imagining it like those little, like the ones that like send out like a supersonic pitch that I can totally hear because autism.
And remember, you had standing weaves in the Age of Legends to plug these into, so they always worked. You didn't have to create a ward. You created a ter'angreal, plugged that ter'angreal into a standing weave, and that was a more reliable way to create. Then you didn't have to refresh the ward. You didn't have to worry about it being broken. You could like unplug it, right, and then it would go down, plug it back in, right? Like there's, yeah. I imagine a lot of ter'angreal were essentially ways to recreate wards for everybody.
Yeah, totally. But I'm imagining him kind of, being a little funny looking, like one of those garden gnomes.
Sure. Oh, okay.
little rotund, funny little hat,
Uh-huh. I'm kind of thinking of like the Pied Piper, right? Because
Oh, yeah. Very much. That'd be the red aesthetic. Yeah, except leading away. Yeah, for sure. And then the Talisman of Growing.
Yes, this is the talisman that makes waygates.
Yeah.
A stone carving the size of her hand, all deep blue curves. It felt like stone, at least, though somehow it did not look carved, was for growing something. Not plants, it made her think of holes, only they were not exactly holes, and she'd not believe anyone had to channel to make it work, only sing the right song.
Yeah, because it was for the Ogier to use, and they don't have the ability to channel, and there weren't standing weaves at the time, so it had to be something they could activate.
And we hear about how did they grow waygates? They sang for them. They used the song of growing, right? Because that's also the song of growing. What are they growing? Waygates, right? And what are those holes?
I mean, I'm sure they use the song of growing for a lot of things, but yeah,
adapt
it to whatever the thing is. In this case, with this amplifier, you can grow an interdimensional portal.
And, in some ways, is that not the source of Mashadar, right? Because it becomes this growing, living... The ways are a living thing, and they have a parasite that infect them.
Yeah, it was definitely they dug too deep kind of thing. They built a world too big, and yeah, it generated its own parasite. I like that better than the male power that initiated it, like somehow corrupted it. I like the idea that it organically grew its own predator parasite that just tipped the ecology out of whack and like, whoopsie poodle.
Well, and I always like the theory that a little bit of Mashadar got into the ways and corrupted it and became Mashadar. Yeah.
There is a way gate in Shadar Logoth, so yeah, I could see if it opened up and like some Mashadar was like sucked into it, basically. That could have been the breach of containment that let, an invasive species in, basically.
And then, like, it couldn't survive there naturally, but it was able to infect and mutate and basically adapt to that place, but then it couldn't get back out again.
Right. It was like a cave salamander or whatever.
Because Mashadar really is all about place. Like, especially when we get more of that at the Sanderson stuff, where he needs a place to inhabit.
Yes.
Right? And so if a little bit of that mist got in, I could see it, like, sort of inhabiting the ways and corrupting them.
Right. You took the ways into yourself such that you can't leave. You are now bound to this place that you have destroyed. Congratulations, you asshole. Yeah, so that's cool. And then we get to RJ. RJ himself, his little self-insert.
His little statue.
Yes, the bearded, smiling man with fiction and nonfiction books. The Kindle, the Buddha Kindle of RJ.
And I like the truth versus lies and fiction versus nonfiction, where I'm like, I love reading lies.
And I also like how it's one of the few times that RJ really leans into how the meaning of words change across languages. He is, famously monolinguistic across his entire multicultural world. But this is fun because he, does have the old tongue, and he gives us this experience of like the literal translation versus the interpreted translation. And like,
right.
That's important for understanding how legends fade to myth, because sometimes mistranslations can be the root of a lot of mistakes and theological problems.
And it's also nice that we get the words truth and fiction in the old tongue. I feel like those are good, like, if you're gonna program, right? I feel like you could use those words. So I don't know. There's just something about having
Easter egg that.
Truth and a little, like, we're talking about programming ter'angreal, and he gives us ones and zeros in the old tongue. I feel like that's kind of fun.
Yeah, that is cool. That is very cool.
Because you could also truth or fiction, or on or off, or
it's a binary.
It's a binary.
State
yeah, exactly.
with no null value. Yeah.
We get mention number 2, count them 2, of Min's viewing, keeping her baby safe so far.
It's so funny too, because she actually does have a thought in slightly earlier. She had Min's assurance her babes could not be harmed, but with her control of the power so slippery, damaging herself was more a possibility than ever. I'm like, Elayne, are you telling me that you understand the loopholes? You, in your own internal monologue, understand the loopholes?
Yeah, no, and she goes on. She like talks about that at length, and it's just like, what? How do you do that and then explain your subsequent behavior?
Yeah, like, be cautious or be strategically courageous. But why are you I guess it's Camelin and their freaking maternity health. They're riding both horses at the same time, right? Elayne has to be reckless so that we get annoyed at her, but she also has to be practical enough that RJ doesn't have to literally hand of God save for every other page. I guess. I don't know. I wish that she could properly gamify Min's viewing rather than just beating us over the head with a very tired argument over and over.
So once they're done going through all the ter'angreal, that's the end of Elayne and Aviendha, basically, for the rest of the series. Because essentially, Aviendha goes back to get browbeaten into admitting she's a wise one for the next couple of books.
Yeah, we have this nice triumphant moment, and then bam!
Aviendha sidelined.
Now we're yoinking Aviendha out of the plot, browbeating her into asserting herself for way too long, depriving us of the lovely relationship between the two of them, putting Elayne in danger, completely sidelining Aviendha. Just like, what does she do with Rand? Piss him off by existing. What does she do with Min? Get pissed off by her existing. Like, there's no point. What does she do with the Aiel? Break their ter'angreal to give us Sanderson's weird vision of a future that definitely isn't going to come to pass. Like,
right. Right. And that I have to explain is not going to be the actual future all the time. I get really frustrated with that because I'm like, no. It's clearly changed. She changed the name of her kid already. Clear evidence that that is not going to be the future.
Yeah.
So once you know it's not going to be the future, none of that matters because and also like the whole what gets me too is this idea that the Shanshan are unstoppable, and I'm like, circles. They're like, circles will kick their butts. Like, that's all they cannot stand against a circle. They can't make one.
Yeah. The inevitable tide of Shanshan just taking over and the war of attrition that no one can win against them. It's giving them too much magical Russia powers.
That misunderstanding, I also agree. The Oliver equals Geidel Kane. No, he is not.
Ugh.
And then also why doesn't Moradin just balefire himself and then he never has to come back because balefire eliminates your thread? No, it doesn't. It just means the Dark One can't resurrect you.
Yeah. Which would be a good strategy for someone like Lanfear.
Yeah.
To get out of the everything.
Well, yeah, but she doesn't want to die.
Yeah. No, yeah, there are some pretty common misconceptions out there that we have to tackle with our superior knowledge.
It's because some of them they're just the misconceptions of the characters themselves that later get corrected and are unreliable narrator stuff. Some of it's just people not reading that closely and not realizing like having your thread burned out of the pattern doesn't mean it's burned completely out of the pattern. It's just burned back a little bit. So you die a few minutes before you actually die. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But for now, we've got, the Aviendha yoinking, and it is ostensibly because Rand has called for the Aiel to join him in that cabin that gets set on fire by a bubble of evil in a bit. And, where the death gates happen, all that. He's calling people to him so that he can do stuff. And he's like, I need these Aiel in particular from Andor. And so that's why they're taking Aviendha away.
But the way they do it, I mean, it's clearly like, Aviendha's like, why are we doing it now? And she's like, we have no time. We have to leave right now. And she's like, really? You're interrupting me? I need to protect Elayne. No, Elaine's got plenty of protection. Your protection isn't important. Like, every time Aviendha is expressing an opinion, they're undercutting her and disagreeing with her. And I think they're literally trying to push her into pushing back against them.
Yeah.
You're not learning anything. Your training has been in abeyance for too long. But I'm learning from Elayne. We don't care about that. That doesn't matter, Whatever you may have learned, you've forgotten much, right? Like, you're an apprentice still. Have you forgotten you're an apprentice still? Because if you've forgotten you're an apprentice and you're going to push back, then you could actually be a wise one. So maybe you should forget that you're an apprentice.
Yeah.
Have you forgotten that?
Yep. She's laid it out pretty plain.
Yeah.
Like, if you weren't an apprentice, you could do what you want, but you are an apprentice. You going to do anything about that?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
No. Okay.
Because, it's like they just say, we're going to beat your ass for disobeying us. And instead of saying you and whose army, she drops her girlfriend's hand and runs away. Like, I think if she had just clutched Elayne's hand harder and said, no, I can do more good for my people here. If all you have to teach me is obedience, I'm a wise one. They would have been like, damn, all right, that was quick. Good work.
I do love that the wise one walks over to her food and says, like, who approved this? Is your wise one? Is your midwife, keeping track of what you're eating? And Elayne goes, I don't have a midwife yet. And she's like, why the fuck not? Like, you are pregnant and all of these women are running your life. You need to have a midwife to basically protect you from all these other people.
Yeah, which is like true. You're not supposed to be Victorian era ignoring your body until it's unavoidable and then suddenly deep diving and summoning medical professionals. You're supposed to like have a medical team helping you with every step of the process from before to after. Like, this should not be news to a prospective queen.
No, fortunately here in America, we have really comprehensive and easy to access healthcare for pregnant women, so it's not an issue.
Yeah.
Right?
About that.
I don't know. I've never been a pregnant woman, so I wouldn't know. And I have no empathy for them, so there's no way for me to ever research that subject.
Yeah, it's really hard to find anyone telling anyone anything about how difficult and ridiculous it is. It's super difficult, deeply buried information. But yeah, I mean, the surveying of Elayne's plate and going, what is this nutritionless nonsense? And Elayne going, it's fine, I'll deal with it later. Like, Elayne has no idea the bullet she is dodging by getting overruled at this point.
Like, and I love bringing up Elayne. Well, even Elayne, who has this huge temper, right, still listens to her midwife.
Yeah, because, like, you're supposed to avail yourself of people who know things. That's what they're there for. Like, it's supposed to be that people who want to help people get an education and then get compensated for their time when they help people. Like, this should not be complicated, either in fantasy or in real life. But apparently, it's both. And that's unfortunate.
Well, and again, this is where I think you have that weird dichotomy between the England Camelin and the fantasy world of Camelin, where you end up really creating a women's healthcare system that feels like medieval England, and you're going, why? This just seems like they would have figured this one out a little bit better. But then I guess I should also ask the same thing about healthcare in our country. Like, why haven't we figured it out better?
But that hasn't made any meaningful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does she end up getting Melfane? Is that the person who ends up being her midwife? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And Melfane comes in and reads every single woman in the palace an exhaustive list of why she is inadequate for failing Egwene or failing Elayne. I love Melfane because Melfane is no nonsense and practical and understands the concept of prenatal health and like maternal nutrition, and she's great.
And by the way, I don't believe any of this nonsense would have happened if Lenny was still in the palace.
You think Lenny would have good prenatal care advice?
But just because she has been around so many of the pregnant queens,
that's true.
She at least would have made sure that Elayne wasn't getting bullied, right? Like,
well, either that or she would have been the worst bully.
That's possible, but I doubt it. I doubt it. She's got too much common sense.
I would like to think so, that she actually has the practical lived experience to know what does and doesn't work. Or she's the gatekeeper of weird royal traditions that no one in their right mind would do because it's dumb.
But that's never been my take on Lenny.
She gives terrible relationship advice to more gays.
Okay, fair enough. But her sayings, like, she doesn't... Because all of her old sayings are just made up on the spot, right? Like, we all agree she's not actually pulling old sayings. Yeah, she's just telling you what she thinks in the moment.
Yeah, but she would probably be very familiar with the basics of what good midwives do. She would probably insist on getting a good city midwife, like, brought up to the palace, like, probably would have gone to the other people who work in the palace and been like, who of you has a cousin or a granddaughter who's a midwife who I can bring in, and probably would have literally gotten Melfane anyway. Yeah, I think you're right that Lenny would probably have helped in this situation by a lot.
Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but Robert Jordan wanted you to notice that her breasts were very tender from being swollen because they're huge. She has huge breasts, and they're going to keep getting bigger. I don't know if you noticed that, but she's got big, swollen, gigantic boobs that are going to get bigger.
It's very important to note that. Also, she's not going to do anything as gross as have morning sickness because she's a magic lady.
Jordan.
Yeah.
Jesus
could have done without all of that, for sure.
So she, on Aviendha's way out, she gives her the turtle, which is the ter'angreal, right?
Yes, just to power up ter'angreal.
And the ter'angreal, the ring ter'angreal that helps her get into Tel'aran'rhiod.
So that way they can talk in the dreams. Because they didn't just find a literal handful of communication devices. Right.
Right. Okay, missed opportunity there for sure.
Yeah.
Look at all these very helpful devices that we're going to put back in a drawer and never talk about again.
Yeah. I wanted to research the herbs that she's got because it seems like that might actually be like healthy shit. Burdock, black haw, I'm assuming that's black hawthorn, cramp bark, dandelion, and nettle. Like, I don't know what the fuck cramp bark is, but burdock, black hawthorn, dandelion, and nettle are all the kinds of, like, herbs that witchy medicinal people will be like, yeah, you should drink that for a bunch of reasons. I'm assuming cramp bark is a synonym for another one of those kinds of herbs. And it's like, okay, so she's got one thing going for her in the health department. She's got some medicinal herbs. But, like, that's not a lot.
Where's Nynaeve when you need her?
God. And, like, I can tell you, burdock and dandelion and nettle are pretty bitter. Like, nettle I've definitely been able to cook to taste pretty good. And burdock leaves, I mean, are kind of like kale. But burdock root is real bitter and dandelion's real bitter. And it's just, like, apple and bitter herbs. Like, I don't know. What is it, Passover over here? Like,
I got nothing to wait. It sounds gross to me. It sounds bland and gross, and I would not want to eat the way Elayne eats when I'm trying to support my own activity, much less when I'm trying to rule a kingdom and grow another person.
Yeah. Like, there's no salt and no fat in her meal. Like, what is she supposed to run her brain on?
Right. Like, how do you grow another life without fat? Babies need fat.
It's a thing. It's a thing. And, like, what do you think those boobs are swelling up with?
Right.
I mean, not right now, but, like, you know, it's just, yeah. He took a bunch of women complaining about pregnancy in, like, one book one time and decided that all the stereotypes that he gleaned from that were good enough to put together a pregnancy plot. Which, like, yeah, he didn't miss literally everything. Like, tender boobs and needing to pee all the time are very common complaints. Like, that is absolutely true. But, like, pretty lady no get pukey is just like, some women don't get nauseated, I guess, supposedly. Yes, RJ displaying the whole man knows things thing he called himself on for earlier in the chapter. Precisely. He does give himself appropriate side eye, which I do appreciate.
He's like, I know I'm writing about this stuff. It's not my wheelhouse. Moving on.
Yeah. So yeah, Dorinda and Nadir do the world a favor by getting Elayne the prenatal care she needs through sheer bullying overpoweringness. And Asanda supplies the name of Melfane, who's great.
And then I have a tearful goodbye, basically.
Yeah, Aviendha comes back in, and we see the contrast between her and the other wise ones, because the other wise ones are bedecked in a million, necklaces and bracelets, whereas Aviendha just has 2 pieces, because she's a little baby wise one. She's only just begun her collection. Like, that's how all of them started, was with just 1 or 2 pieces that they had picked up during their apprenticeship relationships and all of that. And then they become a wise one, and they accumulate more as they gain status and experience over time. And she's just like, it's so obvious. She's just a baby wise one. All she has to do is say so.
And, you think about it, how long the wise ones lived, at least the channeling ones, right? It doesn't take that long. You don't need to gain many different relationships, especially if people don't live as long as you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. People you meet in your travels, people that you help over time and give you a token to be like, thank you for, like, resolving that feud or whatever. Like, yeah, it's a record of what's happened in your life. And not much has happened for Aviendha, but a little bit's happened, Just a skosh.
I think she's had a few more than a few things. She's also, I think she's very prideful. Like, one of the reasons she doesn't wear a lot of jewelry is because she comes from the maidens, and the maidens don't wear jewelry because it rattles and makes noises. So there's an aspect of that where she's, like, much less jewelry than even, I think, other apprentices at this point. These are the 2 things that are just vastly important to her, because it's Rand, the man she loves, and
Egwene, one of her very best friends, for 5 minutes before Elayne just casually slipped right into that friendship without any comment. So yeah, then we go with the tearful goodbye, where Robert Jordan sees how many times he could get them to call each other sister in a desperate effort to stave off the headcanon, the steamroller that I am coming in with.
no, really, they're sisters, I swear. Or maybe he's just kinky in that way. We'll never know.
Hey, mister, she's my sister. Yeah, so they say that this is not going to be forever, but we know that it is forever because the books end before they get to reunite. So that happens.
We get headcanon they're hanging back. Well, I mean, they're there at Rand's funeral together, right?
Oh, that's true. That's true. Aviendha and her non-existent feet. Yeah. Oh no, they do actually meet again in Sanderson's books because Aviendha like sneaks into Elayne's war tent and like scares everyone.
Oh,
and
that's right.
There's
Yeah.
that whole very awkward scene. So I guess they do technically meet again, but it's under Sanderson's pen and it doesn't have the emotional resonance that it should because he understood that Robert Jordan had written a sapphic romance and was not touching it with a 10-foot pole.
Nope. However, for some reason, he seems to be okay with the man and multiple wives-ish thing.
Mormons. There's a shininess there, and it's in the writing. It's in the faces, it's in the music, it's in the history, it's in the writing. It's Mormons.
You say that like Seinfeld and Newman.
And I have never watched
Mormons.
Seinfeld, but sometimes preferences.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's a mood for sure. Seinfeld is definitely a mood. Curb Your Enthusiasm is also a similar mood. If you've ever seen any of that,
No, it's part of the thalwag of culture that I avoid.
Yeah, it's a little. There's a lot of nihilism, I think, in Seinfeld, and I don't think people necessarily want to admit that.
Yeah, it's. I do know that my autism coach is obsessed with Seinfeld, and it's like his comfort show, and he very much respects the writer who's behind like that and the other projects he's done. He's really into that guy's work and talks a lot about it. And yeah, there's a dry kind of humor that I can see in said autism coach that I'm like, all right, yeah. Little bit of the world is so shitty, we're just gonna go with nihilistic humor. It's like, okay, that tracks. Speaking of tracking, back to the chapter. Readout? That's all I got left? Okay.
Yeah, Alex said tearful goodbye.
And as quickly as that, they were gone. As quickly as that, she felt very alone. Aviendha's presence had become a certainty. A sister to talk to, laugh with, share her hopes and fears with. But that comfort was gone.
That comfort sure was gone.
That southern comfort was gone. Asanda had slipped from the room while she and Aviendha were hugging, and now she returned to set the coronet of the daughter heir on Elayne's head, a simple circlet of gold supporting a single golden rose on her forehead. So these mercenaries won't forget who they're talking to, my lady. Elayne did not realize her shoulders had slumped until she straightened them. Her sister was gone, yet she had a city to defend and a throne to gain. Duty would have to sustain her now.
How many times after your sister leaves you go, duty will sustain me? No, that's clearly like, I'm not going to get any. My duty will have to sustain me because I'm not getting laid.
Yeah, also apparently Andorrans don't understand the concept of masturbating.
Right, well.
But
again, Victorian England, right?
God, yeah. Yeah, also I don't relate to the whole like my comfort and existence have been completely taken away and now I just have to sustain myself on pure like duty. Like I have lived such a soft privileged existence. I have never hit that kind of quarter and I'm just like cannot relate. I would just be like, fuck it, Dylan, you're in charge. I'm gonna go gestate.
I feel like you're also not like the kind of introvert that always needs to be with people.
No, I am not.
And yeah, like I feel like Elayne always needs people around her at all times. Never is similar, right? Like if she's by herself, she's just like, what? I feel lost. I need to go be with people.
I'm like, if you want to be people around me, you need to take a number and make an appointment.
Oh yeah, no, extroverts are a different fucking breed, right? Like,
Yeah.
I met an extrovert at work, and I can tell when they're like, I'm like, okay, well, see you later, and they're like, oh no, I'm like, I'm gonna go relax in my car, and like, well, I'm relaxing right now. What's wrong with this? And I'm like, well, we're talking, and that's not relaxing for me. And it's fine. I enjoy talking with you, but it's not relaxing.
Right, yeah.
And they're like, no, totally. This is how I relax. I hang out with people. Like anyone who hangs out with people to relax, not an introvert.
Yeah, I know so few of those people. I know nothing but introverted cats, I swear. Which is good. I like it that way because then I deal with them very rarely. Yeah, also like when I visit like my actual sibling and then like okay, for example, I'm doing a family Passover this coming weekend and my brother's not going to be here because he's in Hawaii at someone's wedding, which got scheduled, before I was like, I want to do Passover. And I am not fundamentally devastated at my core by the fact that my sibling will not be present at this thing. It's not like my entire existence and comfort has gone. Like, yes, it would be nice to have my brother there while I do this family event, but like, I don't need my sibling in this way that Elayne is like, duty will sustain me now. Like, that's not how I'm approaching this event.
Whereas, yeah, I look at Never and her sister, and they're 2 years apart. They were raised together. They both are very much tied to Portland, and part of the reason is because they very much want to be in the same city together. I recently realized that they call each other pretty much every morning. Like, because I'm not here a lot of mornings, right? And it's like, no, usually when she's getting up and like doing her makeup in the morning or taking a shower or whatever she does in the bathroom for that amount of time, some of that time she's on the phone with her sister. Like they call, and pretty much every morning while they're getting ready, they have a conversation. And and it's like, I think she would be devastated if she and her sister were separated in any way, shape, or form, where they couldn't talk all the time or see each other. I mean, she lives 5 minutes away, right? Like, it's like walking, you know, like she's not quite walking, 5 minutes away driving, but it's really close. It's less than a mile.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, people have different relationships with their siblings. I have a very distant but close relationship with my brother. Like, we don't talk hardly at all, but we get along fine. We just don't have a lot of need for each other's presence in our lives. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's not necessarily indicative of everyone's sibling relationships. But I still don't buy that RJ used the word sister to any effect at all in this goodbye. I'm sorry. No, that was a waste of ink. You could have just said lover.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?